What is up, and welcome into the block. I have got my guys, Carl Reed, Blake Brockermeyer, here ready to talk some college ball. Before we get into today's show, like, subscribe, continue to get us out there as we build the block from the ground up. Gentlemen, it just means more today. SEC Media Day is coming up very soon, so we've got to preview the conference overall. Just wrapped up our Big 12 preview show. Now it's time to dive into the SEC, and where do I want to start? Of course, projected final standings. So, Blake, I'm going to give you the tough task here of projecting SEC for us in your projected order of finish.
Well, the SEC West is the hardest conference, the hardest division in college football. They've got a ton of talent as usual, so someone's got to go last. My pick to go last is Auburn. Brian Harsin survived the attempted coup d'etat last year. Auburn looks pretty good in the trenches. Obviously, Tank Bigsby is one of the better running backs in the SEC, but there's just a lot of questions on the back end for them defensively. I wonder how their season will go if they lose an early game that they should win, just with morale. So I expect them to lose 6 of their last 8 games. I mean, they've got a tough finish to their schedule, like a lot of the SEC teams do. So that could spell the end of the Harsin era at Auburn very quickly. After that, my next team is the true wild card for me. I've got LSU next. LSU is a talented team as usual. Brian Kelly did a great job just filling all the holes of the guys that left in the portal at LSU. They've got one of the most talented defensive lines in the country. And Kayshon Boutte is, if not the best wide receiver in the country, definitely one of the top 3. So there's talent there. They've got a favorable schedule. Wouldn't be surprised if they moved up a few spots, but I got to see it to believe it with LSU. I think they're probably a year away from really getting things rolling, especially breaking in a new quarterback. And then after that, I've got Mississippi State. The Pirate returned 17 starters, which is impressive. Their defense scares me. They're a boom or bust defense. They blitz a lot. They're not gap sound all the time. I do look at their schedule, which is absolutely brutal. And if they maximize and crush it and play to their best of their ability, I see them losing 5 of their last 8 games. So they got a tough schedule, and they usually knock somebody off that you don't expect them to, like last year they did at A&M. So I'll be curious to see what they look like with some guys returning, and Will Rogers is a guy I really like as a quarterback. After that, I've got Arkansas finishing, or I've got Ole Miss finishing 4th. Lane Kiffin was one of my teams last year that I thought was going to ascend and surprise people, and they did. I think this year they might take a little step back. They are the portal kings, and they went in and got some great players out of the portal. I really like their offensive line. They got one of the better units in the SEC. Zach Evans is as talented a running back as anybody in the country. Jalen Robinson, I think, will be an electric receiver for them. So they've got some great pieces. Defensively, I think their D-line is going to be solid. After that, I look at the back end of their defense, and I've got some question marks. So I think the end of their season, 3 of their last 5 games, I could see them losing. So I think that they'll start off hot, and I think that at the end of the season, they might slip up a little bit. I've got Arkansas next. I think KJ Jefferson really has improved a lot as a quarterback at Arkansas. They have a favorable schedule. They got the tough games early. They go to Jerry World and play A&M, and then they play Bama at home the next week, back to back. So that will tell me a lot about how Arkansas is built. But I see them better offensively than they were last year. And I love Barry Odom's robber defense. I think their linebackers with Bumper Pool and Drew Sanders and Jalen Catalan on the back end with some of the transfers they brought in are going to do a good job of keeping the ball in front of them. Second place, I've got the Aggies. I think A&M's likely a year away. They got a great schedule to do it now. They have to avoid the hiccup game that they seem to have every year. How they lose a game at home at Kyle Field, I'll never understand that. But they got to go to Tuscaloosa and play Bama, and that's going to be a difficult game for them. But I really like what A&M's doing. Obviously, in recruiting, they've loaded up with the #1 class in the country last year. They've got a lot of talent, some young talent offensively. What are they going to look like this year? Are they going to improve? They've got the players. So I need to see it on the field to believe it. And then winning the SEC West, I have Alabama. Alabama is loaded everywhere, and they've got depth. I think the biggest question mark at Alabama this season is their road schedule is one of the toughest, if not the toughest in the country this year. They've played some brutal games on the road. Vice versa, their home schedule is pretty easy. So they got to win all their games that they're supposed to win. If they have a hiccup along the way, it won't hurt them, but they can't have two. And so that's how I see the SEC West playing out this year. And it's going to be an incredible, talented conference. And it's going to, there's some incredible games that are going to be must see.
Blake, if Jackson Dart plays really well for Ole Miss, could they pass Arkansas or Texas A&M potentially in the West?
I mean, potentially they could. I mean, they got the talent. I mean, offensively, you got Michael Trigg, the tight end from SC that they brought in with him, and I mean, he's going to be a real threat for Ole Miss. They haven't had a tight end in a few years that can really do some damage. So, I mean, it wouldn't shock me. I see them maybe. I think Matt Corral was a huge difference maker for them, and I just don't see them quite being the same team offensively that they were with Matt Corral. He's just such a leader and a great player. I see them maybe running the ball a little bit more. They've got a great offensive line, and they got multiple running backs that can do it. So if they just career it, I could see that. But I think Arkansas's schedule just favors them more than anybody else because they've got the schedule. Them and A&M both have a schedule that favors success.
All right, so we've got Blake's SEC West standings. Carl, I'm going to go to you for the SEC East.
You know, everybody always talks about the West when you go into the SEC, and a lot of times people forget that the East is still there. There's been some national champions that's come out the East. Last year, the national champion Georgia Bulldogs were a member of the East. I'm going to start off here in the East Division, number 7, Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt, they still have a lot of holes. They're trying to do a good job building their program. They are starting to get some kids in recruiting, but they still have a ways to go, you know, to be up in the upper echelon of teams in the SEC. University of Florida, Coach Napier is in there. They have questions at wide receiver. They have holes at other places on the field. It's going to be a while before we see the Gators back in the national championship conversation. At 5, we have the University of Missouri. The University of Missouri, Coach Drinkowich, he had a really good recruiting year this past year, led by freshman Luther Burden. A lot of it is going to come down to how good Brady Cook can play at quarterback. They made some key additions on the defensive side in the transfer portal, but Missouri is going to have to win some key games to prove that they need to move up in the East. The University of Kentucky at number 4, led by quarterback Will Levis, who's going to be a potential first-round pick. Mark Stoops always finds a way to win a couple of games that people feel like he shouldn't win. So Kentucky is always a threat to wreck somebody's season. South Carolina, Shane Beamer has a lot of people excited right now about the University of South Carolina. The addition of Spencer Rattler, how well Spencer Rattler plays is going to play a huge role in the South Carolina. They also are very good at the tight end position. I'm very excited to see what they're going to do on the offensive side of the field. And will this be a renaissance year where Spencer Rattler comes back out and proves that he's one of the top quarterbacks in the nation? At number 2, Josh Heupel has people talking about the University of Tennessee again. They are excited in Rocky Top. His offense is playing at a breakneck pace. If their defense can establish itself with the quarterback play that they have this year, then the University of Tennessee can make some noise. Heupel is doing an excellent job. And number one in the East is the big dogs, the University of Georgia. Kirby Smart has built his program up in the same image as Saban has at Alabama, and they just look like a lot to handle right now. They're loaded on both sides of the line. Quarterback is returning. Great coaching staff. They're going to be a problem. I don't see anybody in the East this year beating the University of Georgia.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, Carl. I think Georgia's loaded. It'll be interesting to see the first game of the year. It's not an SEC team, but Oregon's got some guys. We'll see what that looks like early on and kind of get a feel for them. And they got to go to South Carolina early in the season, which is always a tough place to play. When I look at the East, I look at Tennessee's schedule, and they are at Pittsburgh, at LSU, at Georgia, at South Carolina, and play Alabama. So that is a beating for any team, and so that is that'll be the that could be the end of Tennessee if they can't survive that, because that's a lot of physicality and tough. So we'll see how that goes for them. And I agree with you. I think South Carolina is a sleeper team in the East that could do some damage. They've got some talent, and defensively, I think that they look pretty good as well.
All right, guys. So let's go to this. I want to talk about, you both have Brian Kelly and Billy Napier, new head coaches, finishing 6th. Why do you think that is, Carl?
Well, I think right now, coming in with a new roster, I know that the University of Florida, they lost a lot of guys in the portal. They lost some key guys. I just think it has to be a wait and see approach to see what the kind of product that they're going to put out on the field. And in my opinion, it's the same for LSU. We just don't know what those teams are going to look like yet. We won't know until 4 or 5 weeks into the season how it's going to play out. And I know people are accustomed to both Florida and LSU competing for national championships, but it's some work to be done before those programs get back in that conversation.
Yeah, I'm with Carl, especially on the LSU end. I think lots of questions for me. You know, they're going to have a new quarterback. Their offensive line has some questions with me. It looks like they'll probably start a true freshman at left tackle. Brian Kelly is going to run a different system than Ed Ogeron did at LSU. Defensively, I think they're going to be really good up front, like I said earlier. There's just so many new faces. Building a new culture takes time. And I mean, maybe Brian Kelly can do it year one, but I think they're probably a year away. He can go in the portal again. He can recruit at a high level like LSU always does. They're going to have a lot of talent always in Louisiana. Right now, they're losing some of that to other schools, but I know LSU will come in before signing day and probably be able to get these guys assigned for them.
So as we talk about these standings, give me your wild card team in each of these divisions who could go anywhere when we talk about these standings and how they finish. Blake, I'll go to you first.
To me, it's Arkansas. I think Arkansas, their schedule, it just really favors success for them. I think, you looked at their schedule last year and it was brutal. I mean, it was one of the hardest schedules I've ever seen in my life, and they did great. And so this year, it seems like it's more favorable for them. They lose Georgia, obviously, which helps. Anytime you can lose a Georgia or Alabama off your schedule, then that's huge. Obviously, Alabama's in the West, so they're not going to lose them. But I think, KJ Jefferson showed me last season that he can do it. I wasn't sure about him early on. Even as the season started, I wasn't sold on him. But watching him against Alabama late in the season and as the season progressed, I was sold on him. Can Hazelwood be the guy to take over for Treylon Burks? I mean, they're going to need a guy to step up to be that guy for them. Is he going to be that guy? And then I'm a big fan of their robber defense. I know Drew Sanders hasn't played in the box before, but I think him and Bumper Poole are going to just run and hit people in space. Barry Odom does a great job of casting a wide net and then attacking the ball as soon as it's caught. So they could surprise some people, I think. And they got a great home schedule for them. So I went to the Texas Arkansas game last year, and their fans were really good there, and it made a big difference. So I think they're my team that I would pick in the West that could do some damage.
If I'm looking in the East right now for my wild card team, a team that can definitely shock some people and surprise some people, I'm going to look at the University of Missouri Tigers. They had a really great recruiting class led by Luther Burden, who's the #1 receiver in the nation. If they can get solid quarterback play this year from Brady Cook, they have other pieces. Another receiver that will be going into a sophomore year is Dominic Lovett. They have another outstanding kid in Jamarion Wayne that was signed. Now, these are going to be some young guys they're going to depend on. And I think the X factor for them offensively will be running back Cody Schrader. Cody Schrader led Division II football in rushing in the nation last year, transferred out of the transfer portal to the Missouri Tigers. If he can help fill the role of Tyler Beatty leaving and losing Tyler Beatty in the run game, you can see the University of Missouri give people in the SEC fits this year, and I could potentially see Missouri rising up the standings on the SEC East and causing a lot of problems for people.
So I want to talk about maybe a team or a coach who may not be able to make a ton of noise in these standings. Who is the coach on the hot seat in this conference, Blake?
Oh, it's Brian Harsin, without a doubt. I mean, kind of like I alluded to earlier, he avoided getting fired after year one, which is crazy because, they were one play away from beating Alabama, which would have made him a legend at Auburn. So it's just the coaching world is crazy. For some reason, it didn't work out as well as he wanted to in year one with alumni or boosters or whatever it was. It just didn't work. So everyone else in the SEC looks pretty stable to me. I mean, they're either new coaches or established coaches. He's the one guy that really sticks out like a sore thumb on a guy that has a chance to not be around after this season. But Auburn's invested a ton of money into their coaches that aren't there anymore. So do they want to keep investing millions of dollars into coaches that are coaching elsewhere? That's the question they'll have to answer. And just looking at their schedule, I mean, it doesn't look good for them at the end of the season because their schedule's brutal. So we'll see what they're made of, but they got their work cut out for them this year.
I think down at Auburn, they got to really do some soul searching and ask themselves, what is going to make you happy at Auburn? You had a huge sampling size of Brian Harsin from Boise State and Arkansas State to decide on whether or not you wanted him to be the coach. And you went on an absolute hostile takeover to try to knock this guy out the box. These are the same people who ran Gus Malzahn out of town. I don't even understand why Brian Harsin wants to be the coach at Auburn anymore, except for the money. The way that he was treated this offseason was ridiculous, and it was deplorable. The University of Auburn, they need to figure out what it is they want out of their football program. It's not a job that I would see a lot of big-time guys wanting to take with the way that that program is ran down there at Auburn. It's sad to see the way the coaches have been treated, and they really need some real direction from somebody going forward. Somebody has to be in charge of that deal. Oftentimes, money guys and boosters that pay for things, they really don't know anything about football. And so for you to get rid of Gus Malzahn, go get Brian Harsin, and then try to run him out after year one and put him in this predicament with recruiting, put him in this predicament with being able to procure coaches who think it's a shaky situation. It just shows the lack of leadership down at Auburn. And it's very disappointing to see an SEC program of that caliber moving the way that they're moving at Auburn.
Well, I think the expectation at Auburn is a national championship. I mean, it wasn't that long when they were playing for it. So I think they've got, like you said, the boosters and the people involved in the program can make a lot of decisions. So they got to pick a guy, leave him alone, let him do his thing, let him run his program. And that's the key. And so, someone will want that job. It's a great job. It's in a tough conference, but it's a job that Gus Malzahn's proven that you can beat Alabama. You can go to the national championship game. You can win a national championship. So it's just something that, they're going to have to decide on who that right fit is for them and just leave them alone.
And Blake, the guy that led them to the national championship game a couple years ago, is coaching at Central Florida now. He beat Alabama. He did all those things you said, and that wasn't enough for the people down there. I don't know what they need to happen down there. It's really confusing to me.
All right, let's go from the coaches to the players, Carl. I want to know, who are your top 3 Heisman Trophy contenders in the SEC today?
Well, when I look at the Heisman Trophy guys, you have to start off with Bryce Young, the defending Heisman Trophy winner. He definitely stepped up in some huge moments last year, especially in a game and a half when Jamison Williams wasn't able to play. He was able to carry that team, and he's returning, and he's got a great group of talent around him. So you'd have to put him at the top and see if he's the first guy that can repeat as a Heisman winner since Archie Griffin did it for Ohio State. Now, the next guy that I have on here is Will Anderson. I think that Blake and I could both agree that Will Anderson is the best player in all of college football. And so what I really want to see out of Heisman voters this year, I think that Will Anderson was snubbed last year, not being invited to the finals of the Heisman ceremony. If this award is truly for the best player in college football, Will Anderson is the best player in college football. And if he produces like we expect with another monster season, then he should be the guy who wins the Heisman. He should be at the top of the list, and we got to break the mold. But we have become accustomed to quarterbacks and running backs and receiver types, offensive skill guys getting it. A defensive guy hasn't done it since Charles Woodson, but Will Anderson should be the first, in my opinion. He's the Heisman Trophy winner. He's the best player in the country. A third guy I think you have to look at is Will Levis at the University of Kentucky. He's potentially going to be in the Heisman race. If he has another outstanding season, there's already talks of him being a first-round pick in the next NFL draft at the quarterback position. So he's a guy that a couple of big wins, he can make some noise and also find himself in New York.
Yeah, I think if Arkansas does what I think they can do this year, I could see KJ Jefferson putting his hand in the mix there, and I think also Herndon Hooker of Tennessee. If they maximize and they do what they did last year offensively, I think those are 2 kind of dark horse candidates that could somehow get in there in the SEC. But I think Carl's got the likely 2 candidates from Alabama winning it, and if Levis crushes it at UK this year, possibly. I worry about, Wandell's gone. Who's going to be their guy? Their O-line's got a lot of missing pieces and question marks from last year. So I'll be curious to see what their offense looks like this year.
Blake, and you are right about one thing. KJ Jefferson at Arkansas is a guy that I don't think we're talking about nearly enough. He's a guy that is going to lead Arkansas this year. He is a big-time special player, and he has seemed to be an afterthought a little bit, but he is a prime-time performer as well.
Give me all the KJ Jefferson love here on the block. All right, Blake, I'm going to you with this one. What are we circling on our calendar? What is the game of the year in the SEC?
Well, I think most people would look at the regular season game of the year as Alabama and A&M and Tuscaloosa. But I look at the Alabama game at Tennessee as the game of the year, in my opinion. I think Alabama has dominated that series. They've won 15 games in a row. I think Tennessee is much improved. Last year, they gave them a pretty good game in Tuscaloosa. And I think Tennessee, this is the year that I think that they can cause some problems, more problems against Alabama. It's at home. It's going to be a crazy atmosphere. Alabama really struggled on all of their tough road games last year. And so I think that's a game that I have circled as a really tough game for Alabama. And I think Tennessee fans will show up like they did at the Ole Miss game last year. And I think the obvious game of the year that everybody I don't know if everybody wants to see it, but you're going to probably see it, is going to be Alabama and Georgia again in Atlanta. I think that's, heavyweight battle of the year that looks likely to happen, but you got to play all the games to get there. So I think that's the game that I think a lot of fans are curious to see. I think most people would probably prefer not to see them there, but we'll see how it goes.
Blake, I'm gonna tell you what. You shocked me that you went there instead of going Bama, Texas A&M with all the drama behind Jimbo and Nick. But Tennessee, that is going to be a pivotal game. But I haven't seen anything out of Tennessee since I was in high school that's going to let me feel like they can compete with Alabama. So I can't go with that game just yet. In terms of Tennessee and Alabama being the game of the year in the SEC, I still want to see Jimbo and Nick arm wrestle at the 50-yard line before the game.
Yeah, I just think the game in Tuscaloosa, I think it's going to favor Alabama. I think when you play in College Station, it changes everything. Their fans are incredible. It's the loudest stadium I've ever been in, and I think that's a game changer. Tuscaloosa's environment's not as hostile and loud as it is in Kyle Field, but I think Alabama will be ready for that game, and A&M will be too. But I think it makes a big difference when you're playing at home against playing at Kyle Field.
Now, I am going to say this. Last year was a lot made that Jimbo was the first assistant to beat Nick in a game. There is an assistant coach that worked with both Jimbo and Nick that also said that wasn't the first time that Jimbo beat Nick. He said Jimbo Fisher used to dominate Nick in the noontime basketball league at the University of Alabama. He said he used to beat up on him pretty bad to the point where Nick made Jimbo start playing on his team. So it's been a competitive rivalry for a long time. Maybe they should have a free throw contest before the game to settle it.
I love it. It's going to be a great game regardless. I'm looking forward to hopefully going to it.
All right. All kinds of stories here when we're talking about the SEC. So let's talk about which freshman is going to dominate within this conference, Carl. Who are you highlighting as the freshman to watch?
Well, the freshman to watch has to be the University of Missouri's Luther Burden. Luther Burden came in as the number one wide receiver prospect in the country. He's electrifying with the ball in his hands. He can play outside on the perimeter. He can line up in the slot. He can go in jet motion. He's a dynamic return guy, arguably the best return guy in all of high school football last year. And he's going to be a day one starter for the University of Missouri. There's never been a recruit that has been as ballyhooed coming in as one of the hometown kids for the University of Missouri as Luther Burden. And if Missouri is going to have a solid year in the SEC, it is going to be on the back of this freshman, Luther Burden. And I think he's going to put the entire country in the SEC on notice this year that he is the real deal.
Yeah, Carl and I have both given Luther Burden a ton of love this year. So Luther, you got to come through for us, my man. We're trying to give you some shine, so don't let us down.
I'd put a safe bet on he won't, but I'm excited to see what Luther Burden will eventually do for the Missouri Tigers. All right, so young guys, we are excited to see them, but we know the big headliners, Blake. Who is the top NFL draft prospect in this conference? And I feel like I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, it's easy. That's the Terminator at Alabama, Will Anderson. I mean, Will Anderson's a tackle for loss machine. I think he had 34.5 last year. He's a sack machine. I think he had 17.5 last year. I mean, he's an all-world player. He can play with his hand down. He can play in space. He can rush from the edge. He can rush inside. He can do it all. So, I mean, Will Anderson doesn't even have to play football this year to be a top 3 pick. So that's how good he is. So, hopefully he can stay healthy this year. He can have a huge year. He can go down as the greatest defensive player in Alabama history. If he can do what he did last year again, they can win a national championship. So big expectations for Will Anderson, and he's a heck of a player and is going to be a great NFL player as well, in my opinion.
Will Anderson is the real deal. It's been much talked about. It's been much covered. I mean, who can't you compare him to? Is he going to be the next Lawrence Taylor? Is he going to be as dominant as Reggie White, Derek Brooks, guys like that? Derek Thomas, the great former Alabama linebacker. He's got so much talent. He can do it all, rush the passer, stop the run, inside, outside. He is the number one player in the country and definitely the number one prospect in the SEC.
Well, we will continue to make sure that this is the number one show for all things college football. You at home, like, share, subscribe, get us out there, and we will see you again very soon here on the block. Gentlemen, it's always fun.